Ladies and gentlemen, can you please welcome to the microphone Mr. Pravin Gordhan.
Assalamu alaikum, good evening, Moulana, to all of us that are present here today. And in particular, may I thank the trustees of the Masjidul Quds, I'm trying to get the pronunciation right, for this opportunity to say a few words after this wonderful award to Mrs. Omar and to all of the recipients that are receiving one or other form of recognition here today as well. I also want to recognize the presence of Mr. Derek Hanakam, who is the original brave man who got us going to resist corruption, who is present here. To Mrs. Louise Asmal and to colleagues from Parliament that are present here as well. Let me not forget, in case Judge Siraj Desai is in the audience already, the judiciary as well, although I don't have to be worried too much about the relationship between the executive and the judiciary too much these days. But he's an old friend. We first met at the University of Durban, Westfield in 1972, if I'm not mistaken, and a little bit earlier as well. So a recognition to him. But today is Women's Day, so happy Women's Day to all of you. Can all the men stand up and give a round of applause to the women? Thank you very much. I think we need to do that more often, don't you agree? Reference was made to the 1956 March of Women to the Union buildings demanding dignity and human rights for themselves and for others in South Africa. At that time, this famous quotation became their leitmotif, their mission. And it said, "Now you have touched the women. You have struck a rock. You have dislodged a boulder. You will be crushed." It took a few years after 1956 to crush the apartheid regime, but through the efforts of Dalla Omar and many others in our country, indeed, we've crushed this terrible system of apartheid that has befallen us. But Dalla Omar and the family, the Omar family, and in particular Mrs. Omar, who just received the award, represent for us integrity of the most important kind, represent courage, because he had to survive those detentions, as did the family, visit Mr. Mandela on Robben Island, amongst other responsibilities that he had, be principled in the way he conducted himself. But you know, in today's world, you can be a person of principle, but you need one more ingredient to actually make a difference, and that is to have courage as well. Because it takes courage to act on the principles you have. And that courage is what those people who stood up either silently or otherwise and did the right thing as far as the motion of no confidence was concerned the other day. The Moulana and I will have to debate this a little bit, but I'm sure we'll provide ourselves with an opportunity to actually do so. So in recognizing Mrs. Farida Omar, you recognize Dalla Omar, but you recognize those qualities that we require both in leaders but in our communities as well today. And one should not talk lightly about the kind of impact that the experiences of and during the apartheid period that families went through, and the kind of courage that they required, the kind of encouragement that they needed to provide to their partners or to their children, without which encouragement those activists wouldn't have had what it takes in order to stand up to what apartheid had to offer at that time. And it was that period during which torture, detention, as Mrs. Omar just described, and many worse things, even death, was the result of activism during that particular period. In today's South Africa, whilst we talk about our past, whilst we've, over the last 23 years, I think, done remarkable work in this country, Remarkable progress has been made in terms of our constitution, our courts, the kind of services we provide to the vast majority of South Africans who were excluded both from the economy but also from basic things like education, health, housing, clean water, and decent living conditions, although there are many that still need to be provided with better services as well. So that progress is a remarkable thing that we have done, and that's the foundation on which our future generations will build upon. But equally, we must be frank that that period of struggle that we have talked about in the past is being revived in some ways and is testing us today as well, because there's a contest going on in today's South Africa between those who want to use public resources, that's your tax money. Now, I'm not a tax commissioner any longer, so I don't have to talk about Uplang and things like that here, right? But it's utilizing your tax money in a way in which it benefits a few, in a way in which it's finding its way to bank accounts all over the world, including Dubai. I hope too many of you don't visit there too frequently. And where state-owned institutions are supposed to be contributing to increasing investment in our economy so that our economy can grow, so that that growth in our economy provides jobs for young people and gives people hope in terms of earning their own income, but the dignity of earning their own income as well, so that they can live decent lives and give their families decent lives. And you can estimate, ladies and gentlemen, anything between 100 billion and 200 billion rands has been lost over the last few years to the system. And so this contest between what has become known as state capture, and you can call it money capture as well, means that a new kind of struggle needs to be waged, a struggle that reestablishes integrity in our system, reestablish the trust of citizens in government, and that includes all of us who are in government, and reestablishes the fact that governments are there to serve citizens, not themselves. And in the process of serving citizens, it's equally important, and this has become a pattern in many parts of the world, where the top 1% or the top 10% nowadays owns an amount of wealth that is equal to between 50 and 70% of the wealth of the rest of the citizens, whether you look at it at a global level or whether you look at it at a country level. That's the phenomenon that globalization and modern capitalism has actually created for ourselves. So amongst the choices that we need to become very aware of is what kind of respect are we going to have for the Constitution and the rule of law? Are we going to show the kind of respect where criminals can steal as much as they like, they can take as much as they like, they can break as many laws as they like, but nobody will get prosecuted for that, as you can see? How are we going to meet the challenge of more inclusive growth? And by that we mean that growth, and this is again a challenge globally, but for ourselves as well, we cannot have an economy that still excludes the majority of South Africans. So something different needs to be done. Something more innovative needs to be done, building on the kind of foundation that we've laid over the last 20 years that will ensure that the next 20 years results in an economy that is far more inclusive than the one that we have today. And let me end by saying that that kind of inclusivity is going to be absolutely crucial to ensuring that the poor don't continue to remain poor, that they begin to progress in life, earn an income, have some assets in their possession, have wealth of a different sort, but wealth that they can pass on to future generations. Whereas in South Africa today, what we pass on from one generation to the next is poverty. We need a South Africa where either the current generation or the very next generation needs to pass on something better, needs to pass on some assets, particularly amongst our poor communities, so that the future generations actually have assets of their own. And so we hope that all of you will also become active in one form or another, just as your communities have been active, as you can see this evening, in so many different ways, both on the cultural side, the religious side, but also in terms of the contribution that many of you have made to attaining human rights and democracy in South Africa. So let's hope that we move from the current brand of politics, if you like, to a politics of hope, a politics which says to young people today, you don't have to leave South Africa, stay here, because you have both a duty and a responsibility to ensure that you build on the foundations created by Dalla Omar and many others, and create a better South Africa for the 55 or 60 million people that we will have. And once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening on my behalf. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call upon one of our trustees, Mr. Liaquat Sondeh, together with two of the committee members, Mr. Ishtiaq Badruddin and Mr. Mehboob Roika, to kindly come up on stage, present a book titled The History of Masjidul Quds, as well as a coin to Mr. Pravin Gordhan.
It's not dollars of gold, eh?
And it's all declared. There we go.